Thanks. Okay, gents. Stream start. All right. I know that you're pretty busy on your projects, so you're wanting to probably focus on these, but I'd like you to start thinking about next year, because I know many of you are taking my games course. So here's a chance for us after this lecture to talk about games projects that you would like to see included, and then me, Maris, and Christopher are going to have a discussion about how we can make the games course really cool next year. Today it's mainly going to be focused on AR and its applications. So who's done AR so far in mobile? Anyone covered it? No? Okay, wonderful. So AR can be loosely defined as an interactive experience where reality is augmented with additional information. So this can be retrieved from sensors. Basically, it's computer-enhanced reality. It's not virtual reality, because virtual reality is something that completely replaces the existing reality. But you could say that mixed reality is AR and it's VR. So sometimes people kind of go AVR and such. So that's a bit of a blurred line. This is the Magic Leap. So here the controller is actually a virtual controller. So they're recognizing the gestures of the hands, and then the positions of the fingers indicate what the interaction should be. So the input and output can actually be quite varied. So often people think of just the visual component to AR. So for instance, like a menu will pop up, or in a video game, for instance, you'll have a billboarded UI above an enemy or a health bar. That's sort of an AR component. But it's also covering other aspects such as spatial data. So for instance, where are you in the world? Why does that matter? You could have movement sensors. GPS is a common one as well. The physical feedback as well needs to be taken into account. So sometimes that can be haptic feedback. So for instance, you can get a visual warning, a physical warning. If something's happening, like a vibration. You can also be warned of heat or cold. You can heighten your senses with smell. You can get information about wind and speed as well. Audio input as well. So for instance, imagine if you were going into combat and you were just using your ears. Like, it would make sense if you had sensors that could tell you if there was a subtle sound elsewhere and point in the direction of it. It would also be useful if you had a communication device with an AI, like a voice interface as well. That could be termed as AR as well. Here's just an example of AR in the farming industry, for instance. So you can see different spectrums of light there. So you can see the quality of the fruit. So another aspect of AR, which is ongoing at the moment, is VPS. So that's a visual positioning system. So this is something that Google is looking into at the moment, and they have been for a while, to limited degrees of success. So what I did want to show you is just what that was, because I think we can expect to see more of this in the next few years, particularly if 5G does roll out.
It tracks you.
Okay, so we'll go back to the beginning.
My name is Johnny Lee, and I work in the Advanced Technology and Projects Group at Google. Our small team here, based in California, has been working with universities, research labs, and industrial partners to harvest the last 10 years of research in robotics and computer vision to concentrate that technology into a very unique mobile phone. We are physical beings that live in a 3D world, yet mobile devices today assume that the physical world ends at the boundaries of the screen. Our goal is to give mobile devices a human-scale understanding of space and motion.
This is going to allow people to interact with their environment in just a fundamentally different way. We can prototype in a couple hours something that would take us months or even years before, because we didn't have this technology readily available.
What happens if you have all these pieces in a phone? How does that change what a phone is?
We have created a prototype phone containing highly customized hardware and software designed to allow the phone to track its motion in full 3D in real time as you hold it. These sensors make over 250,000 3D measurements every single second, updating the position and rotation of the phone, fusing this information into a single 3D model of the environment.
We have a problem called navigation indoors, and it's a solution to that problem.
It tracks your position as you go around the world, and it also makes a map of that.
Imagine that you scan a small section of your living room and then are able to generate a little game world in it. I don't know of any other controller or gaming device that can do that at the moment.
Putting all this together, they pulled in experts from all around the world and got them all working on the same project.
Those are very high caliber people. Why? It's very simple. I think actually people believe in the vision.
Localization and mapping is there on your phone and you just use it.
It's this ability to follow in other people's footsteps.
And we can also benefit from what we do for the project back for the open source community.
Use it for visually impaired, give them auditory cues on where they're going.
Being able to map your home, check out, see how this furniture looks in the room.
Virtual windows to sort of different worlds. I mean, the possibilities are really endless.
Over the next few months, we will be distributing dev kits to software developers to develop applications and algorithms on top of this platform. We are just in the beginning, and we know there is a lot more work to do, but we are excited about where it is going to go. The future is awesome, and we believe we can build it faster together.
Okay, so that's what Tango was. I think the project is no longer called that. I think the thing that they struggled with was they were trying to sell a phone that had is it stereo optics, so 2 cameras that allows the phone to basically calculate depth accurately. But everybody has phones that just have 1 camera, so it's quite difficult to actually work out where things are.
You speak it loud with the air conditioning is very loud.
Yeah. Is there any way I can turn down the air conditioning?
I can try up to turn up your voice. That's your angle.
I'll turn up my voice. Okay.
No, I don't think we can operate it. Can we? Does anyone know? It's the we that are fighting you guys with the air conditioning for It's always at the wrong time, right? So either it comes super stuffy and hot, or it's blasting and you don't know what to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just try and carry my voice a bit more. If that's okay. I'll just pretend you're back there.
In worst case, you guys can also move a bit closer. It's not like there's a massive need for spacing out like this. I know you like a little freedom and all that kind of stuff. I
just like to be away from people.
Let's gather around in a circle, right, and hold out each other's hands.
Let's
no,
be a
not
team.
that bad, but we can get a bit closer, I guess.
There's no need to sing and by
No singing, okay.
Okay. Okay. So Tango is officially stopped, but I think that there was the issue with the stereo cameras, and also there was an issue with transfer rate. So when we go to 5G, then we're going to have gigabit internet connection from our phones, and that will actually enable Google to stream all of our video data. So they'll actually be able to collect within rooms, within buildings, where things are. Whether that's a good thing to do is another ethical question. But this is definitely something they're working on. So the Tango project, you can still see it in a number of Google's AR APIs, but I just found this guy's work on it, and I thought that was really interesting what he did. So you know how in with HTC Vive you work out the room settings. So you create like a play area. In this, he was using visual indicators to basically scope out a playable area for AR, and then when they were moving around in 3D, the phones were able to orientate themselves in the world. He's very small, so he's very slow, so I'm just gonna speed this up. Yeah, so here he is configuring a marker there. Terrible choice of music. But yes, this is one of the problems I've noticed when I'm working with Google's latest iteration of AR, which is the Google AR Core code base. So what this does is, with any camera, it doesn't matter if it's a single camera, it collects points of everywhere in the room, and then it builds meshes out of those. And it tries to remember where things are so it can recognize them later. There are a number of problems with using the mobile phone as a sensory device, so that's why I thought that this chap's project, where he is building around a playable area with markers in different places, was so interesting. Because some of the games that we made, and you'll notice this if you follow these tutorials, is when you walk through the area with your phone, it will detect the floor area, and you can place things down on the mesh, and then you'll turn around and it will recognise that they have turned away, and leave them behind, and come back. And sometimes nothing's there, and sometimes there are things there, and that's the phone trying to work out where it is in 3D space, and it's really unpredictable. So that could be why it hasn't really kind of taken off yet in terms of visual positioning. But we could approach it in a way where we put the emphasis on the user to define the play space, and that could make AR a lot more viable, like how VR is set up. So that could be a fun project for those doing game development next semester. So these are the two setup points you will need. For the Unity setup, you'll need Unity 2017.4 for the latest one, or 2018. You will need a Tango compatible phone, so I have bought a phone for us to test with if nobody has an up-to-date Android phone. So this is my Android phone. I also have an iPhone for iPhone development. So this is an S9, so I think an S8 and up is fine. So there's tons of tutorials here, but they are pretty basic.
We have a Tango tablet. If anyone
Oh, okay, great, yeah, because you can't take my.
Yeah, but it's good.
Yeah, you can use my phone in the labs, but you can't take it home. But maybe.
Yeah.
You can take Maris's tablet home. So AR Core, this works natively on Android. It works on Unity, on the Unity game engine as well, which is cross-platform. But interestingly, I also noticed that they have an iOS SDK Android Core. So AR Core is actually cross-platform too. AR Kit, which is Apple's native AR development, isn't, which makes it kind of less relevant in a way. And also, to develop on an iPhone, you have to be an Apple developer and pay for a certificate. So it's not really practical for us to teach you Apple development in AR. I hope nobody minds that. Personally, I don't mind not doing Apple development. So the sample scene is basically just the surface detection, where it creates a mesh from the point cloud. and you place down these things. I did have this on my phone as well as another thing, but unfortunately my phone locked itself and I had to reset it yesterday, and I lost everything, so that sucks. But we could definitely do this in the games course for those of you who are doing that next year. So talking about the current AR games on the market, I define these as Pokemon Go games. They're not particularly advanced, but they do use AR Corp and AR Kit's plane recognition system. So there has been an update to Pokemon Go where they can spawn models of bushes, and I believe the mechanic is that you tap on it and then Pokemon springs out. It's primarily a GPS-based game though, so those do have their own unique problems that are different from the other AR setups. So most of the AR games use a mapping software, either it's Google Maps or it's Bing Maps. OpenStreetMap is what I prefer because it's free and open source, and it's maintained by the community. So all of these have built-in data as well as details on the streets. You can get open source route finding. Am I being quiet again? Sorry. Yes. So OpenStreetMap. I believe it's used by satellite navigation systems as well, because there's a number of APIs that have route finding techniques that you can just download. The license allows you to use them commercially as well. But one of the things I've noticed from the GPS AR games that we've made in industry is how you work out where people are in the world, because GPS isn't always that reliable. If you've used the mapping software when you're out and about, you'll notice that sometimes they have this little blue circle that increases, which is the area of uncertainty, because the phone doesn't know where you are. So that can be a problem if you want to calculate, say, how far you've moved. Like maybe, for instance, a fitness game, they can use the pedometer for steps, but obviously that can be hacked because it's just based on movement. It's not actually steps, so people can just do this. They can just bounce up and down, and then it thinks you've had a step. So they're notoriously bad. I believe there's a game called Zombies Run, which is kind of like a post-apocalyptic game where you've got to get resources and you've got quests to run around a street like this, and then it's kind of an audio story, so there's no visual AR components to it. It's just mainly narrative and audio, because people are using it for fitness, and then they're saying like, oh, you need to turn left here, you need to run here. But because of the inaccuracies of GPS and the pedometer, sometimes gets out of sync. So there's some funny occurrences where you've got the person kind of going, "You're nearly there. They're right behind you. Run, run, run. That's it. You're doing great." And really just walking on the street. So it can be a big anticlimax because it's difficult. You also have the problem with bridges and buildings. Because like if you're under a big concrete structure, you can't get the signal from the satellites because the phone doesn't know where you are. You also have approximation from the towers, so that can kind of distort the signal. So can Wi-Fi as well, because you can get the position from Wi-Fi. So there's kind of, for those that haven't played Pokemon Go, there's a thing that sometimes you get into positions and you jump between locations. So for the mechanics where it's important to kind of like run a distance and then your egg hatches, you can just like kind of hack the thing by standing in one of these areas where the GPS is confused and you bounce around. Other exploits are GPS spoofing, or what's the other one? Or you could just drive around as well. So some of these things you can't really solve at the moment, but so you have to kind of design your application around it. So if people do exploit it, it doesn't kind of like break your game or break your experience. It's like you have to isolate the players in a way of like saying like, well, if you're cheating, it doesn't ruin the game for everybody else. There is something we're working on, which is kind of like a cultural heritage thing, and it's just kind of like some Norwegian romanticism thing. So basically, you go to certain regions up in the north, and then some trolls spawn, and then you collect the trolls. You know, it's just like a shameless Pokemon Go rip. But there are some kind of cool things that we'd like to do. So, for instance, we'd like to like you could find the tracks, and they could lead you to a particular destination. The issue that we had though was working out what direction you were, because while phones have compasses, those are unreliable too. They're notoriously bad. If you drop your phone, you can also break the gyro. If you spin around and try and do AR navigation, you get this kind of floating point error. So, you know, like the more you turn around, the less accurate it becomes. So, like you quickly lose orientation of which way's which. So the best way that we did was just working out the vector of the direction of travel. So, for instance, if you were going this direction along this road, we would just calculate the speed of what you're going at, and then kind of just say like, oh, now you're here, now you're here. So you could stop under a bridge, and then it would kind of keep going, and then you could say like, well, we haven't heard from you for a while, so we're going to think that you're not moving. But that means you can kind of smooth out the errors when you lose your signal. In terms of mapping solutions, you can also get terrain data from a number of sources. NASA's a particularly good one that's free. There's also the EU's Galileo and Copernicus satellites. There you can get data on, for instance, like vegetation types. So, for instance, if you were building some kind of representation of Norway, you would know where the kind of forests are, for instance. Another cloud-based solution that we've been working on is something called Vuforia. So Vuforia basically does the learning for you. You can also scan your markers. So here there's like a QR code and custom markers, and upload them to their cloud service, and then that provides the recognition for you. So like this is particularly good if you're say a startup, or you don't have much of a budget and you need someone else to do the heavy lifting. We'll talk about, I guess, the proper way to do it in a little while, because I'm sure Maris is like, no, do it properly. Don't use Vuforia. Teach them the important stuff, which would be the correct thing to say.
Let's go the pragmatic route and see. That's how people should do it. That's how people do it in industry, right?
Yeah, in industries full of striving and regret that you don't have the time or money to do it properly. So now you have the luxury. Let me find the video. Okay, so here's a nice video. So here it uses the marker to detect the plane at which things are, and then it spawns the Space Invader above. Who has played Space Invaders? Because you guys are young. Okay, good. You all know what Space is. It was my first game in DOS. You've heard of it. That's something.
You haven't played Pong?
Pong, yeah. Everyone's played Pong and... breakout. So you have to sign up for a key. I think you get free access initially, but if you go over a certain limit, or if you're using it for commercial reasons, then you have to pay through the nose. So it's good if you have a bit of a budget, but if you really kind of want to build a large application, then I suspect you won't be going for this. You'll be going through your own marker tracking system. So like they have a whole API, C# bindings. It's literally just a case of you scan your picture, upload it, and then you can use the API. So cheating in a way. So one of the use cases is a commerce project that we have been working on, although we had to pause development for the region because we needed to do another job so we could buy a ton of servers, because servers are expensive to run, so we needed to earn some money first. But the idea was you would see like the local regions and you'd have a customized map, and then people would go around and there'd be a GPS element and then there'd be some AR. So here you can see he's looking at something to be decided later. And here we can go into local shops, for instance, and the shops can upload their own markers, or we can give them markers. And so when people go into shop, they can be like, you've come into our shop, here's a game item, or here are points, or something. So it's a way to add gamification to help the local economy. I think we're probably going to see more and more of this, particularly because things are moving towards more decentralization, and we've got like blockchain tokens as well. Maris is probably the best person to speak to if you're interested in doing blockchain stuff. Talking about cloud solutions, there is something that Google and Nantec are working on. I think Nantec is an offshoot of Google. They made the Ingress AR video game, then the Pokemon Go game, and now they're making Harry Potter Wizards Unite. So what they're trying to do is just try to own the whole ecosystem. So they are making an API where they host pretty much everything. So your data gets uploaded to their cloud, and then they handle all the gamification for it. And they just kind of suck up the ecosystem. So we won't be using them because we want to do it properly, and I think it would be a sad case if the whole ecosystem was run by one ginormous company. But if you're interested, it's what are they calling it? The real world platform. So they're looking for people that to do it themselves. Here they've got some examples of doing image recognition on people. So they try and work out where a person is, and you can kind of shoot them in AR, and then they can take damage, for instance. But I think they're really waiting for the 5G, because then they can just like stream from your phone to their platform. For those that don't know, here's Ingress. So basically you have these locations, and they're supposed to be portals. These are kind of statue locations that people have uploaded to their database. So they had something like a mapping solution that's probably Google Maps, but it could have been OpenStreetMap. And then modders have uploaded content to make the map more detailed, and then it's kind of like capture the flags territory sort of game. All of this data has been reused for Pokemon Go. So let's talk about how you would go about doing this kind of properly from an open source solution. So I'm not sure if you've done machine learning or AI yet. I believe that you will be covering it in another course. So TensorFlow, I would recommend that you look into this because this has a lot of integrations with some software that we're talking about. So TensorFlow is a machine learning library for object recognition. So you can include this in, say, like game engines like Unity, that usually you have a wrapper and then that goes into TensorFlow, which can use Python. So TensorFlow comes from a COCO dataset, it's a common objects in context. So basically you can recognize objects in the world, and this is tied into the Open Computer Vision library. So the Open Computer Vision library, I've made some notes. It's cross-platform. It uses TensorFlow for deep learning. You can use other things. I think there's something else called Kafka or Coffee, but I haven't had any experience with it. Have you used anything other than TensorFlow? No. Okay, so we'll probably just be using TensorFlow. So OpenCV can be quite intensive in terms of the machine learning, but you can create quite optimized models, so you can deploy it locally on a mobile phone. I think when 5G comes along, this is going to be used a lot more. There's also statistical machine learning libraries, so you can do like decision learning trees, nearest neighbor. It also has things for 2D to 3D. So here, one of the common approaches for OpenCV, I believe, is for scanning documents. So, like, say if you've got an Android phone, you don't have a scanner nearby, but here OpenCV can detect the contours of like a piece of paper, and then it will do a matrix transformation to deform it into 2D space, and then you have your scan. So it's very, very convenient. Other things it has is marker detection, as well as gesture recognition, facial recognition. It does depth of perception from 2 cameras as well, but most phones don't have 2 cameras. So what you can do. So there are tons of tutorials. It's open source, cross-platform. It is good. You can just go to opencv.org. You can download it. You can compile it. You can go into the code base, and then you can set up your markers. So basically, it's very much like Vuforia, but you get to see the code from the ground up and walk all the way through it and put it into your game engine. So I think it'll be a lot more rewarding if we tackle this in our games course. Who would be interested in doing a few lectures and projects on OpenCV and making stuff work in games from real world data? 1 person, 2 people, 3 people. Right. Sorry. Okay, so we can probably spare like 1 or 2 lectures setting this up, integrating this into a game engine, and we can look at ways of doing this towards your games project. Whether you want to take this further really depends on you, because the goal of the games course is to kind of have a working game that you create in a group, but we will be breaking it into smaller deliverables. So we'll be trying to learn something from each deliverable and take a portion of that code base in towards your final game. So you learn some skills about team working, you learn some skills about integration, and then you cover a number of topics. So that will help you figure out what you're going to do for your bachelor's project. And stuff will go wrong. So you will make the mistakes in that course, and hopefully the bachelor's project will go better. So, who's doing games? Hands up. Yes. Yes. Who's doing AR? I'm doing AR. So we only have 4 people. So it's not that enthusiastic. Maybe I can make it cool. So I feel like I can only really tell you guys where stuff is. You have to be motivated to kind of go and learn it yourself. I can spend some time creating some projects for you, and then you take those projects and run with them. But all this kind of takes time, so I need to know in advance what stuff you want to go into depth with. But these are things we'll talk about later. So what I want to talk about a bit is marker tracking and markerless tracking. So if you noticed in the OpenCV, a few for examples, we use the position of the marker and its orientation to basically calculate where stuff is. So markerless tracking could be like, we just detect through a point cloud what we think the surface is, and then we draw stuff on that. Whereas with markers, the library knows what the marker looks like in 2D. So based on the 3D transform, it can work out the orientation. So that's the difference between marker-based tracking and markerless tracking. So surface scanning and motion capture is particularly interesting. OpenCV does have libraries for motion detection, and the point clouds that it generates and the motion capture has a broad range of use cases and also career opportunities. So it's a cool thing to get into. So this is basically a visualization of a Connect. So the Connect, I think, is discontinued now, but it was Microsoft's kind of like party game thing where it had a camera and we could see movements. It's still being used for commercial reasons. We're making a Connect game for a family park up in the Troll region. So people are still using it. There's a Connect downstairs as well, for those who haven't seen it. And the collection of point cloud data can be used for a number of things. Like, who's heard of the concept of photogrammetry? No? No photogrammetry? Did they cover photogrammetry with Maris Pedersen in the course?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so photogrammetry is basically when you have a number of cameras or just one camera, and then you take many pictures of an object in the real world, and from that you can generate basically a 3D representation, and you can also get the textures out of it, the normal map data, all of these things. So it's particularly interesting in terms of cultural conservation. So like you can see what happened with Notre Dame, for instance. Like, it all burnt down, but people had taken like pictures and scans of the internals of it, so now it can be rebuilt like it was. This is the Artec EVA scanner. I've been wanting to get some, and I've been lobbying the university in England to get some. Maybe they will get them. But basically it's a handheld scanning camera that they use in industrial purposes. So you could use that in terms of in manufacturing, for training. So for example, one of the problems that the Americans and us Brits have is we're using a lot of old military technology. So for instance, like the Harrier vertical jump jet, but nobody really makes the parts, or nobody's kind of like still alive or active, but they know how to maintain the system, so they're just trying to jerry-rig the thing. They use 3D printing to create the parts. So if you create like a 3D scan of the part, you no longer need to manufacture it, you can just kind of print the thing. So that can be really good if, say, like you're on a carrier group and you're far away from home, and then something on the Harrier breaks down, you've lost a plane, but if you have a 3D printer, then you can just print another part when you're out there. Other things that point clouds can be used for is motion capture data. It can also be used to render, record movement in particles, for instance. So often in games, if we want to get particle effect or an animation, we can just record the point cloud data of all the vertices in the mesh, and then we animate that. So I think there's a number of companies that even use the Kinect for motion capture. So if you get a couple of them, then you can get the perspective of the body, and then you can record them, and you can map that onto a mesh. So that's a particularly cool thing to do. It's also a technique that's being used for people who are generating films. So I think game engines like Unity have been used for a couple of feature films now, because the tool sets are, they're so rich, it can reduce the costs, and the visual quality is kind of good enough. I am in Steam. I will turn off Steam. There's also a motion capture library in the inland. So if any of you there, I work in Hammer as well as here. So if you ever want to come by and see the motion capture studio, then I could probably show you. In terms of working with point clouds, I wanted to briefly cover graphs and triangulation. So something that's definitely worth looking into more is something called Delaunay triangulation, and that's basically generating a triangular mesh from points. So you can create two sets of graphs with Delaunay triangulation. You can create a Euclidean distance-based Voronoi graph. So basically that's just these graphs, you can kind of move between the two maps. If you generate one, you can get the other. So Delaunay and Voronoi graphs could be really good for representing regions on a map. So for instance, if you've got point data which is geographical, you can work out a type of heat map for how much foot traffic is there being, how much crime is there being in certain areas, and you can generate any number of triangles there, so you can see the similarities. I'm probably not going to do a good enough job in explaining what it is, so I suggest you just Google it. This explains what it is and how it works quite simply, and I've also included some papers explaining it. So here we have a paper which is rather dated. It goes back to 1978, but it explains what the graph is in a lot of detail and how it's calculated. There's also a number of libraries that you can find. Some of them, I think triangle.net is one I've used in the past. So that code base is fully available. So this is really cool. So this is pretty groovy if you want to generate like a terrain mesh from point cloud data. So I will just add that there for reference later. So yeah, I would highly suggest that you guys look into how that's done and look into the algorithms of generating that. It can be a bit nitty-gritty, but it's very easy when you're actually looking at the code. Other applications, and this is kind of like applications of games technology as well as AR technology. So I think what we're seeing is a lot more tech being used in the military, particularly like off-the-shelf tablets, applications made in game engines such as Unity, because wars are always about economy. So you want to, if you're going to fight, you have to produce enough units that are superior to the enemy to be able to defeat them. It doesn't matter if you have the best technology if you don't have enough of it. So, for instance, I think the Germans in World War II, they had really big tanks that had lots of armor, but there just wasn't enough of them. They had rocket-powered planes before anybody else, but they didn't have the fuel because we were starving them. So it's all about how cheaply and how quickly you can create your military units. So yeah, we're seeing Xbox controllers used to pilot tanks. We're seeing drone pilots being trained in video games. We're seeing pilots being trained in simulators. There was also this game made in 2008 where they were training troop movements. So this was primarily for the US Army, but then they also released it on the Xbox, and I think it became a critical hit, but the US Army didn't like it so much because it was too gamey. But you had 2 squads and you had a number of tactics you could use. You had indicators for cover, so good places to fall behind, and each of your team members had kind of different abilities and stuff, so you would position them, you would throw smoke, the other team would get in position, and you could lay down covering fire and such. So it's a lot easier to train in a simulated environment than a real environment. It's much cheaper. And as well, as warfare gets more autonomous and we start using more drones and such, the human element gets taken out of it more, and it becomes who has the best trained military in terms of like the best machine learned military. What tactics are the drones going to employ? How do you defend against them? It's a new kind of warfare, and our militaries are kind of expecting they're going to be fighting against people. So I think this is something where you could get a lot of traction in games, particularly with machine learning as well. Like we all know, those who've played video games with jets will know that planes have 2 types of decoys. They have chaffs and they have flares. One's for heat-seeking missiles, and I think the other one's radar. So they'll pop those and they'll try and avoid the missile. But that doesn't work if your missile is using machine learning and it knows what your plane looks like. Because you can fire all the decoys as you want, but it's just going to go, there's the plane, and it's just going to shoot it down. It's like none of the defenses is going to work anymore once the missile is trained to learn what to look for. So yeah, be interesting to see what the next war looks like. Other aspects. So these are cool things. Yes.
As a defense, maybe you can have a counter missile that can see the missile and then goes after the missile in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Well, I think we have. I think the Brits and Americans have that thing that's called Sea Scepter, but it is kind of like shooting a bullet with a bullet.
Yeah,
So
that is where you add instead just a gun that knows where it is, calculates the conditions, and then just shoots really quickly towards that specific missile.
Yeah. So
Until it explodes.
yeah. So you've got like point defense systems like Phalanx, although that doesn't really work when the missile becomes really big and hypersonic.
Yeah.
So then we're working on lasers, directed energy weapons. But there's also railguns as well, so you probably see railgun flak cannons, something like Battlestar Galactica, sooner or But yeah, I think this is something really, really cool. Unity has been used for military purposes, so if people are into kind of military sims and training sims, this could definitely be a project that you could do and get some interest from. Other aspects, I think, is who has seen the ambulance simulator that we've got at NTNU? We have an ambulance simulator. So what other students have done before is, they'll put on a VR headset and then they'll be in a physical ambulance where everything is in the same position, and then they'll go on missions basically. So there's been some success, but we think that we could do a bit better now. Obviously, technology moves on. So it's much cheaper and much easier if you practice in the ambulance in a virtual world, because if you crash the ambulance in a virtual world, you don't hurt anyone and it doesn't cost very much money. So this could be a fun project to do. For instance, if you wanted to teach physics, why not teach physics in a real ambulance? So your car is actually a car that you're patrolling. And that's an aspect of AR as well. So for instance, like even though you have the virtual headset on, you can actually like feel the thing physically. So if you could scan or model the ambulance, then what you touch with your hands, like either the VR knuckles or the Manus gloves, it would really feel like you're there, and you would really be kind of like actually practicing, and you'd be learning muscle memory. So that could be very, very valuable. You also have kind of like virtual operations. So for instance, like the doctor could be controlling a machine through an interface remotely. Obviously, you want to make sure that your coding is good enough that you don't make a mistake, so you slash through the patient. So doing stuff for healthcare and military, obviously, like it's a bit more higher stakes. It's not like a video game. The bugs kill people. I also know a few nurses. I have an aunt and I have a friend who works as a nurse with Danny Shen. And they have to do everything manually at the moment. They have to kind of copy down paper documents. They have to look at measurement bottles and work out like, okay, what medicine is this? How much is it? How much should I give to people? And then do math in their head. And nurses aren't necessarily the best at maths because they didn't really study that. You know, they're more about palliative care. So if they make a mistake, then someone dies. So what the nurses are really interested in, and I think there are some projects in Ullersson about this, is they're interested in using teaching to nurses how things work. But what would be even better is if we could use like OpenCV to scan the like what the actual drug is, how much is it, scan it, convert it to 2D, put it into a database, then they'll be able to read the text and work out it's this drug. You don't want to give them this much of the drug because then they'll die and you'll kill your patient. So that does happen. So not only could we help train the nurses, we could also kind of like help speed up the process and protect them. So that's something that you could do that has real world benefit in Norway. Other aspects, of course, are more personal healthcare, so putting the load onto the patient. So for instance, you can get many different types of wearables, like the Apple Watch would be one, where you can get heartbeat monitors, and that can kind of encourage people to kind of get the amount of cardio that they need. My mum, she had cancer 10 years ago and she almost died. They had to inject this chemo directly into her heart for like a year, and unsurprisingly they realised later, it's like, that damages the heart. It's like, well, we could have told you that to begin with, like chemochemicals directly into the heart. So she has heart failure now. But the cool thing is we live in an exciting age, so now she has an AI that monitors her heartbeat. So for instance, like when the school's like, you have to go all the way up the flight of stairs, and then you have to teach them math, because my mum doesn't know math and she gets stressed out. Chemo also messes with your brain as well, so she's not as smart as she was. So she gets really stressed out with that, and the danger is that will cause heart failure. But because she has this kind of wearable technology that monitors her heart, it can actually like defibrillate her. So like if she has a heart attack, the AI will be kind of like, looks like your heart's a little bit iffy, let's just give you some juice, I'll beat for you. And it only does that when she's in trouble. So that reduces her stress and makes her less likely to have a heart attack. Whereas like I eat a lot of pizza and fish, so I'm probably going to die of a heart attack and my mum's going to be fine. So I just thought that's really cool. So my mum's kind of like a Borg now, like a cyborg. There's also stuff like FitnessPal. Who uses FitnessPal? I've used it once. It takes so much time. But the cool thing about that is that uses computer vision as well. So you get like a particular type of food, you scan the barcode in the back, and it works out like, it's this, it has this much, and you're like, well, how much am I eating? And you put in the portion, it's like, you're getting this much protein, all these things, and it gives you like little graphs. It's like, eat more protein, you don't have enough potassium, blah, blah, blah. So it kind of just captures everything, and it's a good way to make sure that you don't eat too much. So I know a lot of people use it. So that's another aspect of computer vision. Industrial applications. I haven't done it for everything. I've just kind of done it for things I'm interested in talking about. I think some things that obviously are big in Norway is the oil industry. So the oil industry is really interested in people who do work with computer vision and also games technology. So they can do simulations, they can do training, they can create visual representations of what's happening. Sometimes it's kind of really dark and murky. So this could be useful for like if you're kind of like drilling down, or if you're working at depth. You can do that with robots rather than sending down divers, which is really risky. And there's resources around the world deplete, and there's more competition for resources. People are increasingly probably going to turn to mining around geothermal vents, which are really deep down around the where the plates join, and there's a lot of precious metals because of all the volcanic activity. So you get a lot of gold and silver and those rare metals. So they're gonna be working on robots that kind of roam around the bottom and then like mine all this stuff. You also have the problem from like the 60s and 70s where they just kind of put nuclear fuel in barrels and put it in the ground, and they were like, it's going to be fine. And now it's not fine. It's going to kill everyone. So they're going to have to send robots down to take all this poisonous stuff and store it somehow. So only really with robots is that going to be allowed, and the better the technology gets, the more feasible it is to deal with this problem. Other aspects are gamification, and using AR technologies is actually kind of becoming a really profitable industry, particularly for training. So I know that Google is working on glasses for this. I think as they become cheaper, they'll become really, really prevalent. So rather than like getting people to train each other, you can just upload that information to a gamified or a virtual interface. So if you can recognize certain cogs using computer vision, then you can kind of go, this is how you should use this machinery, and then it will kind of come with instructions like you insert it with this, you don't put your hands in there because they'll get crushed. And that saves the company a lot of money, because then they don't need a person to constantly teach someone. It's always documented. And this is a problem for every industry, is that once you train your staff and then your staff move on, you've then lost that capability in your company. And all the money that it costs to train them in the first place. So you always have to have a next person coming in. You always have to pay that person to train the other one. But if it's done in AR, then you don't have to pay the person training. So it's kind of like half the cost. And then for all the other stuff that come on, it becomes so much more profitable. So that's another way to get costs down. So it's definitely going to happen because the economics support it. Other things are autonomous shipping. So at the moment, this is all done by GPS, which is kind of fine because, you know, if you're out on the sea, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit off, if a little bit to the left, you know, you're probably fine. But if you're going into port, for instance, or if you've got a ferry in Norway that's coming into a port, you need to dock, you need to home in and then come in place. So what they have is they just pay someone, I think, and they just kind of sit there while the boat steers itself, just in case something goes wrong. But actually, I think the whole ship can just handle it because they use the GPS signal to kind of get the ship roughly there, and then they can use basically like markers to home in on the dock, and then just kind of move the ship in close. The majority of the world works through shipping, so like I think most of the things we get and most of the things we eat comes through this medium. So anything we've got to reduce the cost is obviously like help the global economy a lot. Who's been following autonomous cars as well? A little bit. Did anyone see the EU regulation that just came in? No. Okay. So basically, the car will decide how fast you can go in a couple of years. So the car will not let you go over a certain mile per hour, although you can apparently be angry with the pedal and the car's like, oh okay, but the car can just turn itself off based on a signal from the authority. It makes me uncomfortable. But yeah, as we get more towards autonomous driving, it's really important that the car knows what a person is and knows what's in front of it, because otherwise it's going to hit someone. So that's definitely going places as well. So that could be something cool to work on. Am I missing any other industrial applications that other people can think of?
Product validation, maybe? Product validation.
Oh yes.
I saw someone using like look at like food products that have like grown to see if it's healthy or something else we make or something.
Yeah. That's a good point as well. There was a picture I think at the beginning, so that the human eye maybe can't see everything either, so it's good if you can see it through different spectrums.
Yeah, that's also for health. For example, radiologists, they can't see certain shades of grey. The computer can see it. So they will outperform like human radiologists detecting diseases.
Yeah, it's like people won't. It removes the possibility for human error in a way. Although I guess if the person just kind of thinks, oh, the computer's better, then maybe they won't pay attention, and then they'll miss the thing. So I think difficult to know which way it will go. But yeah, those are all good points I forgot about. But there's tons of other industries AR work can go into. So you've got local and global advertisement, like the cyberpunk thing. If you've got your glasses and you look at something, it's going to come up with some details. Like, come in here, buy this, cheaper the price of two. I'm also interested in how we handle the problem of kind of like globalization and the monopolization of commerce. So like the big companies get like Amazon and Google, they can just they can create an entire company and then just kind of subsidize it and push all the other companies out of business. But what if there was a local network that prioritized local goods and can track where things come from? So like for instance, blockchain technology is where you can monitor where things have come from in every step. If people have a choice between something that's locally sourced and something that's globally sourced, are they always going to choose the cheapest option? Or are they going to be smart enough to recognize, if I buy the local thing, then that money isn't leaving the economy, therefore my taxes are going to be lower. But if I keep buying the thing from the globalized company, then my taxes are going to go up because that's less revenue for the economy. And I wonder if people are going to do that or not. Other things as well are the automated shops. So at the moment, you have to kind of put your vegetables down and kind of go, this is a banana, or this is a pepper, paprika, and then it weighs it. What if you could just look at the thing and then go, yeah, that's a paprika and it's this big and it's probably going to weigh this much, so done. It would be so much faster. So I expect that we will start seeing computer vision used for that. Obviously security, like does Norway have the face scanners that Britain does? So you go through and it's all cyberpunky and it kind of just scans you and no one's there.
Yeah,
you still have the friendly people. Yeah, we just have robots now, but now you get scans everywhere you go, and it just takes your face. Sometimes you don't even need your passport; it just kind of takes your face, and then you go. Other things are, this is really big, is education. So we're going to this thing called NCUL. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's run by NTNU and it's up in Trondheim. So basically, it's a big networking event for people in academia, and it's how do you use technology in games to help the academic process. So I think there's been some studies on boys and how gamification, VR and AR, it kind of like engages them a lot more. It helps with memory. So for instance, if there's something virtual, they learn a lot faster. So rather than textbooks, we might see more interactive forms of media. There's also, palliative and elderly care is going to be a big problem because everyone's living longer, which is good, but it's bad for the economy. So we'll have to find a way of making palliative care and elderly care cheaper, but also humane. You've also got space mining, space exploration, services. So I think there's a company called Atensi. So I've been looking at this actually, because sometimes I'm like, why do you want to be an entrepreneur, Rich? It's a lot of work and you don't get paid very well. It's just because I can control my own destiny, basically. But yeah, there's a company here, and I thought this was a really good example of where gamification can take you in your career. So basically, this is kind of like digital training. So they create solutions for enterprises. So they use like a game engine and all the tools to produce like people coming into the shop, people wandering around the shop, and then you have to like interact with them like they're really there. So they seem to be making a lot of money because they keep on hiring. So they're looking for Unity developers and C# developers, so people just working in .NET for web services. So I imagine this plays a lot better than a game developer. So who wants to be a game developer like for recreational games? Maybe. Okay, good. You're all sensible people. Because I work a bit in recreational games, and that's what I've been doing for 10 years, and it's unreliable and it doesn't pay well. So I want you to go and have happy, healthy lives. So I'd like to think that when you do your game related or computer vision courses, that you're thinking of what industries is my skill set practical for. So what do I want to learn, and what do I want to show people when I'm applying for jobs? Because it's rather than you doing whatever you want to do, it's better that you pick some skills to learn, you learn those skills, and then you make something with those skills, and then you'll get hired and you'll have good lives. We've had some students in the past and they've just been kind of like, we just want to make a video game, and yeah, it doesn't really do anything interesting for anyone. So I think they're going to have troubles with their CV when they graduate. Yeah, so it's pretty much you can work with game engines. So it's a pretty cool job. So yes, I wanted to have a chat with you now based on that, and I wanted to hear from you what topics you want to learn in the games course next year, because we have a number of lectures, we have a number of topics we covered last time, but yeah, if there is something that you want to learn, it's good to know in advance so we can maybe change the plan of the course accordingly.
What do you wish to learn when anything you actually have in mind? The end result of it. I want to know how graphics work, I want to know how machine learning works and stuff like that. And being out smaller things out of that is hard because you have to start learning on the console.
Yeah. So you would prefer like just kind of like broad and practical topics?
Yeah, I want to know practical things.
Yeah. Any particular language you want to learn?
I will preference for language development. I want to be a programmer, I don't want to be a C++ programmer.
Yeah, well, the C++ is a good language to learn. You can pick a language. So yeah, but once you can program in one language, it kind of, you can move between them. Although some languages have more complexity than others. Like C++ is a much more complex language than JavaScript. I think JavaScript becomes complex just because of the amount of libraries you can potentially use, and also because the structure is not that structured. Cool. Anybody else? Is perhaps we're looking at this the wrong way? What about particular game types or features of games would you like to learn, like pathfinding, group AI?
Yeah, AI is super interesting.
AI.
Yeah, I'm starting to look into TensorFlow a little bit myself, and I think it's quite interesting.
Machine learning. Yeah, one of the ideas, though, I do need to speak to Maris and Christopher because they like run the course. I just do this and a couple of other lectures, and the rest of the time I work in industry. And that's, if you're going to do, I guess, say you're going to make a war game and it's for training people, like where do you position your ships and your units? What happens when you bring in machine learning and drones? And it's like, can the player adapt to the machine that's learning? Like, what if the machine has already trained a ton of simulations? How is it going to perform?
It would be interesting to perhaps go the one way is make an AI that learns to play the game in the best way possible. How would it be to have an AI that learns to give the player just enough of an edge so that it doesn't feel overwhelmed with skill and learn?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's kind of like the difference between a game and a serious game. So like, the game would need to be fun and engaging, but the serious game's point is it's for it's training, learning something. So if you're going for the public sector recreational use, you want the player to beat the computer. But if you're doing it for the military, you want to face an AI that's wanting to kill you and all your people. So then, the AI is going to be merciless. And we know from what's happened with all the chess computers. So the chess computers has been kind of there's a thing called spiral learning. So it's adversarial learning. So each time it models all the possible moves of the opponent, and then models its responses on how well its strategy was against that opponent, and then it keeps iterating on that. So it just kind of works through all the possible permutations of the chess game and all the possible strategies, and then trains against them. and I think like each AI generation plays the previous AI generation, and each time it just completely destroys the AI, and humans are so far behind it now. So I find the idea of that particularly terrifying, because like, is there going to be a point where we're even going to have people in the decision-making process in the next wars, or are we just going to be? Is it just going to be programmers versus programmers fighting each other? And we just want the smartest, most adaptive, emergent AI that can think for itself in a decentralized platform. Is that really what we want? It's like, yes.
Realistically speaking, learning AI could in theory just become really good at business, and if its only concern is making money, then it could become really good at business. The problem is, of course, that what if that AI came to the conclusion that starting a war would most definitely increase its profits, then it does that in a way that would not incriminate itself, because of course that would hinder its ability to earn more money, and then if it just creates wars, and what if you then have different AIs that thinks in the same way, and yet safety procedures are necessary, but that's dangerous to let an AI free in that way, because an AI will in all likelihood be completely logical. You wouldn't try to give a personality to an AI designed for a specific purpose.
Yeah.
And so therefore you have to be straightforward, and if it's self-learning and you fail to contain limitations that should have been there, that can be really dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point of where this is going to go inevitably, and also how do you train an AI to be moral, and also what morality system are you going to use? Because there isn't one. There's many different. It's like
that depends on your goal, I suppose.
So yeah, like the Christian Republicans might have a different idea than say like the left-wing progressives. You also have like utilitarian moral. So it's like the end justifies the means. You know, if the fewest people die, it is the most ethical solution. So maybe you're going to launch a false flag attack in your populace, and then it's going to be like, yeah, well, we'll go to war sooner, so less people are going to die. So it's worth doing. So it's like,
yeah, but I think like more on specific topics, maybe like evolutionary algorithms, maybe genetic algorithms, and also maybe have a neural network, maybe like just reinforcement learning or something.
Yeah.
And also maybe like flock intelligence, where you have like multiple agents.
So like flocking, so you like avoidance and stuff.
Agents kind of cooperating, achieving some sort of goal.
You will have an AI course, so I do need to check what they're actually covering, because the AI there I think is more practical in the sort of like we're just doing AI, maybe it's for robots or drones, whereas here in games it's for learning how to do it in a games or gamification setting. So it could be like a training simulator, or it could be for the recreational market. But yeah, obviously like we'll want to copy those, cover those topics, but we wouldn't want to copy them. Cool. What about graphics? Graphics we were a bit light on last year. And I know that Christopher has been teaching graphics. I think he's been doing teaching you rendering the height map data for the local region. Have you had?
Not the height map. Yeah, I know how height map.
Okay, so what has he been teaching you?
Just like model loading, rendering lights, and like just basic using the RFW for like inputs. Textures, it's like basically like learn OpenGL.
OpenGL, yeah.
We basically have done like
That's
OpenGL down to the lights thing.
Okay.
And the ASIM model loading.
But
like all those topics, yeah, basically does.
But anything about like the stencil buffer reflections or anything?
Not reflections.
I think we can work with a little bit.
It may just be like theory, but like we haven't. The assignment didn't require it. I don't think most people learned everything we have in the theory lecture.
Yes. So, I mean, creating like code bases and then lectures and then projects for people to do takes a lot of time, a lot more time. So I think each year we try and make. I'm trying to make a bit more, like, I'm trying to make it kind of more interesting, so you can get better results in the end. But yeah, I think graphics is kind of cool, especially if you're doing it from coming from a technical mindset. You guys might be stronger than someone coming from a just a purely arts background, because you actually learn, math, don't you? So you know about the dot product, what it is. Good. Okay, excellent. What about physics? Physics interesting?
Yeah. I would like to know
Physics
different ways of manipulation.
Yeah.
Weight.
Physics simulation. What about actual game stuff, like
Maybe
having networking? Okay, sorry.
Maybe a little bit about security.
So you were thinking like cryptography or something?
Come again?
Like you thinking like cryptography or something? Or you thinking more kind of like how to defend against man-in-the-middle attacks?
Like don't store the health variable on the client or something. Yeah, like
Don't trust the client. Yes, don't trust the client.
Good practices for avoid the misuse.
Good practices. Yeah, I think there's something like in Pokemon Go. Apparently, they didn't have HTTPS security. They didn't have a certificate, so they just got someone in the man in the middle just kind of went, "Hello, I'm going to pretend to be the server, and I'm just going to deserialize your protocol buffers, your binary data format, and then I'm just going to fake the game." Well, at that point, you can just pretend you're the server and then get all the traffic and such. So yeah, I guess there are good practices we can cover. Don't trust the client's a good one, but then it's what does that actually mean in practice?
Some people still trust the clients.
Because I think economically it's cheaper to trust the client.
Yeah, you should do all the rendering on the clients and stuff like that, and then experience level position should be on the server.
Yeah.
Getting rid of wall hacks, for example, in CSGO is basically not going to happen because you basically have to offload that to the client.
Yeah.
Just too much calculations.
Yeah, I think if you're doing actually physics-based stuff, yeah, it can be a bit difficult to do the physics simulation on the server. Even if you distribute it, you still got the cost of it. I think some
maybe best practices for the stuff, and maybe a client check system for stuff that are doing client stuff shenanigans.
Yeah, you can be checking for people who break the rules retrospectively, for instance, rather than implementing it. There's also things you can do make your physics more deterministic, in the sense that depending on what type of game you're playing, you could do the check once at the beginning and just kind of go, I'm just going to shoot you from here, and when the server calculates that, it's I am going to hit you, and then the thing is going to travel to you, and even if you step to the side, the game's oh yeah, it's just the missile's coming for you, whatever, or the missile is always going to land there, and then we just calculate where you are when the missile impacts, so you just kind of don't have homing stuff, it's just all just basic kinematic or IK calculations. So what we could do is we could do a little bit of a combat simulator in networking, for instance. So making missiles fly and then trying to make it look like everyone is synchronized. But if someone's in Brazil and they shoot a missile, you're not going to hear about it for a couple of seconds. But maybe when you do hear about it, you just what do? Do you kind of warp the missile to the correct point, or do you kind of speed it up so it just arrives at the right time? What else we got? What about? I do think we should look at the more industrial ways of doing this. So, for instance, if we could go down to the ambulance and then try and replicate the ambulance. So in AR, if you're actually pressing things, that actually does something, and then we can learn the physics through that simulation. So that could be useful. And even if your ambulance game was a bit boring because it was just a simulation based on driving through downtown traffic, maybe it could be like the Avengers movie where the aliens attacking, and then you've got to drive the ambulance, so you just kind of jazz it up a bit, so it's less boring. But you can still ship it as it's an ambulance game. Okay. What else? We've got 10 minutes. Surely we don't want to stop 10 minutes early so you can go back to your projects. Surely not. A little bit. Yeah, I imagine so.
What did you do in Datix? Did you work on game engine or?
I worked in a few of the teams. I worked as a game engineer towards the end, but I had to work my way up because I joined as a grunt and there wasn't any graduate positions at the time. So it took me a couple years to kind of go from a helper to a junior developer, and there I more worked with Codebase on making tools to kind of dress the scenes and interactions for the level designers. And then I worked as in the game logic team because we kind of realized that we were making a browser-based game engine which was written in C++, but the other guys who were actually making Transformers games were using Lua, and we had different objectives to them, so there was kind of a gap in capability missing, and the teams weren't talking because it was very hierarchical. So I just kind of went over and was like, how's it going? And they were like, oh, we can't do this. We can't make this thing spawn. I was like, yeah, surely just use, just rotate it. And they're like, how do quaternions work? And it's like, well, you don't need to know, just use the method. And what method? And it's like, why don't they have any methods? They have no methods for rotating things. So they were doing things like creating an animation and then locking the keyframe. So it's like, and the turret was facing and then someone jumped. It was like, shit, we can't make it. It's just like, oh no, we're never going to finish. So we just kind of we set it. I was like, we need strike teams. So then the company moved to.
Yeah, that's right. So it's the sense of a group of people to help.
Yeah, so cross-discipline feature teams. So then I made the networked projectile system for the game. So in the betas, you can see all the rockets and stuff flying. So that was, I created the different prototypes of that. I created it's really old now, but you remember the first Gears of War game where you had the mortar and you put it up and it goes do, 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 and you have to gauge where it's going to land and you wait. So there's all that kind of excitement building up and that uncertainty where it's going to land, and you've got all the enemies coming at you and you're just where are they going to be in a few seconds, and then timing it, and then when you get that right it feels really good. So when the producer was coming over and he's like, I want a mortar launcher, I was like, okay, do you want it like this or do you want it like that? And he's like, I was like, I'm just going to make the Gears of War one because that's really fun. So I made that. And everyone really loved it because they were just playtesting it, and I was like, yeah. And then the producer was like, no, we want a ray traced arc, so we always know where it's going. And then no one was smiling anymore because it wasn't fun. So then they cancelled the game because it wasn't any fun after the beta. And that sucked. We worked so hard on that, unpaid evenings and weekends for years. And then I moved to a Skunk Works team. So there we worked on creating an MMO as a surface architecture. So kind of if Unity was for MMOs, and then you were kind of developing in a Unity game engine, and then if you drop things in, and then it would just appear in the world as you were playing, kind of like a Minecraft game. Yeah. So it's kind of like Minecraft meets Unity in a way. So I worked on that for a year and a half until Transformers was going crap. And then all the other sub-studios basically were rolled up and everyone was redistributed, and then that project was dead. And then soon after I left, because I didn't want to work on something that was going to be cancelled and I was going to lose my job anyway.
Did you ever get to meet James Thompson?
James Thompson.
He made he was running the RS study for him for a while, and then he kind of quit running and started working at TEDx.
Ah.
I think he probably worked on the engine around 2012, maybe a bit later.
He might have been there when I was there.
Brilliant guy.
Probably.
Really.
Yeah, I didn't really work on the.
I think he runs a company now with Mark Gerhardt, former CEO of TEDx.
Oh yeah, they
made like Mavericks.
Yeah, they moved on to something else.
Yeah. I think Mark basically just grabbed them.
No, I had to work my way up. So kind of when it came to RuneScape, I was more of a helper. I cheekily did. Wait, this is recording. Right. Thanks very much, guys. Next week.